I stood there with the creative director and the MD, and they were saying, look, like, if you did want to drop out, we'd love to have you. And I didn't even blink. I was like, yes, cool.
Jordan Schwarzenberger is the co-founder of Arcade Media and manager of YouTube sensation The Sidemen, including talents like KSI.
When I heard and when I saw that the strategy was basically to put together a team of different talents, it looked like, I don't know, the Pablo Escobar idea that he had for the Medellin cartel, right?
To date, the group have over 15 million subscribers and have built several seven-figure businesses, such as an alcohol brand, XIX Vodka, a fried chicken restaurant called Sides, as well as their membership platform, Side Plus.
No one saw TikTok coming. No one saw how that would shift things.
What's the lifespan of a content creator? So how is your relationship with your co-founder?
We almost sometimes sit and just go like, wow, we're really lucky, guys. Like,
you're obviously a global expert in this domain. Have you found a recipe to success?
So in the creator space, the one thing that they need to do is...
Jordan, you knew what you wanted to do in life before most kids. You got accepted at King's College. You were 18, and you immediately dropped out to pursue your career. That sounds crazy from where I'm standing.
Yeah.
What made you think this was a good idea at the time?
Yeah, well, I think I had an instinct from when I was at school that I didn't want to just do things because you were told that that's what you needed to do. I was fortunate enough to go to a school where I could experiment with building little businesses and projects and making stuff. So I had this understanding that it was easier than maybe people think to actually put something out there to make, I don't know, a music album, or to make a clothing brand, or, a film magazine, a few of the things that I did. And actually, especially growing up in the time when Facebook, social media was really in its sort of birthing stage and it was coming through, to distribute and to reach people was pretty easy. And actually, if you have a good idea, you could take that idea from idea to execution quicker than any other generation had the capability to do that, right? And I had that instinct. So then when it got to go into uni, and I knew I didn't want to go, I'd started doing work experience at Vice in the summer before. I just knew that it wasn't the one for me. So when I got there, and it was evidently true that it was just terrible and completely insane as a concept, that you'd spend, £40 a session on somebody talking about like World of Warcraft. This was a degree called digital culture, may I just say, right? Mm-hmm. And it was so alien to the real digital culture run by people who, bless them, had no idea, because they were clearly studying for however many years or teaching at King's. So I was working at Vice every Friday, and I'd worked with them over the summer, learned more in a week than I did in a whole semester or whatever it was at King's. So it got to the point then when, the opportunity arose at Vice to join them full time. I was at a Christmas party, everyone was a bit drunk, and I stood there with the creative director and the MD, and they were saying, look, like, if you did want to drop out, we'd love to have you. And I didn't even blink. I was like, yes, cool. As soon as I got home, well, not as soon as I got home because it was very late, but the next day I woke up, and as soon as they said that, I'd put in my stuff and dropped out and started with them after Christmas in 2016. And yeah, it was not even no part of me thought for even half a second that it wasn't the right thing to do. It was probably the most confident decision I'd ever made in my life, because it was just so obvious that it was a complete waste of time for me.
Right.
So yeah.
You had this safe space that you could go to, right? So you got offered this job. Do you think you would have also being so determined to quit if you didn't have this opportunity?
No, I don't think so. I think because that was there, and it was there because I'd kind of prepared a bit of a backup, well, not a backup plan, but what I thought was a backup in the work experience at Vice. And then that materialized to them saying, look, like, we don't want to annoy your parents, but if you want to drop out, like, we'll have you here full time. We'd love to sort of take you on. Obviously, that gives you the confidence to go, yeah, right, forget that, I'm going. I think in hindsight, if I was doing it today, the question would be, should I even go in the first place? Because it puts you back. It doesn't put you forward for so many people. And I get in trouble sometimes for saying like how much I hate university and like going into schools and so on sometimes. And I'll be quite clear to the kids, like, if you're doing anything that doesn't need it, just don't go, stay away. Because you'll get so much more value in the real world, especially today where, everybody has a degree. You can get a degree pretty easily. There's hardly any competition really at most of the big universities. So they don't mean that much, paired with the fact that they cost a fortune and you're years behind. And today, time is of the essence. You don't have time to wait and to waste. And I think a lot of people waste it and then regret it and then end up in a worse position after they finish uni than when they started. So I'm quite strong on that. And like sometimes I do get in trouble, but I don't know. I think it's the truth these days. there's character building that can take place in the real world rather than the sort of fake university bubble that often for most people is a fake reality that they then get used to, and then they have to get unused to it when they have to come back and start working, paying rent, doing all the things you need to do as an adult.
Let's talk about your company. You're the co-founder of Arcade Media. What is it? Talk to me about it.
Yeah, so Arcade Media is a management and ventures company that has set itself up in a very different way because we have one client. So I previously came from the biggest management company in Europe, YMU, which is formerly known as James Grant, looking after people in sport, music, entertainment. People in the UK, you might not know who, like an Anton Decker, but they're like the biggest sort of TV presenters here. Take That, Steve Aoki, like talent across the spectrum. And I sat centrally in that business as the chief creative officer from the age of 20 to 23, 24, and I loved it. Amazing time there. Really grew from a professional level. I treat that as my university period, like really, because I was like C-suite in a big company, able to go through a sales process with that company and be the creative lead in that, able to manage M&A and run P&Ls, all sorts of stuff. We did so much and it was great. And I learned so much more about business than I could ever hope for during that period. But then coming out of that, when a friend of mine who worked there with me, Aaron O'Neill, he'd gone off to manage some TikTokers. He was on the business management accountancy side. He'd met Sam Ewins, who's our third co-founder. Sam has basically become the number one YouTuber accountant in the UK over the last 10 years. He represents everybody on their money. And when you're in with the money, you're in with trust. And when you're trusted, you can have those conversations that most people can't, right? You can get in the door with people. So he'd been looking after the Sidemen from an accountancy side for a while, and he had always seen that there was this opportunity for them to do more, that actually the guys at the time, I think were maybe 7-8 million subs, like massive relative to the time period, doing incredibly well, like the number one kind of group in the country, absolutely smashing it in terms of relevance, having people chasing them down the street wherever they go. Huge. However, they had two operations, their content operation with the channels and then their clothing brand, Sidemen Clothing. That was it. And we're at a period in 2020 to 2021 where you can start to see the creator economy and the opportunity for creators to do more start to open up. See things like Beast Burger, right, at the time, and other examples start to pop up where you go, wow, okay, creators are starting to do more here. And for the Sidemen at the time, there wasn't really any sight of that because they didn't have a team working on it. So Sam and Aaron had spoken and they then brought me in and we kind of came together and said, look, let's speak to them and propose to them a strategy as to how they can go from where they are to another level and for us to manage them. So we did that and they loved it. I had like 15 things in the deck, which was like, the Sidemen 2021 strategy, which is still on my computer somewhere. And most of those things are the same as what we've now gone and done. So when they said yes, we started and the setup was that we would basically manage them exclusively. We would only be working for them. They would only have us. That was part of the problem with the space in the UK as well. Massive kind of fragmentation of who represents who manages who. So we cleaned all of that up for the guys. Just clarity in the market and clarity in terms of us being their manager. And then we were able to get going. And in that time, we've launched a number of brands. We've helped build out their content operation, fried chicken restaurant called Sides, an alcohol brand called XX Vodka. Recently launched a breakfast brand into Tesco's called Best. So we've done trading cards. We've done multiple charity matches, raised like £3.5 million, £4 million for charity. We've launched a charity. We've had a Christmas #1 single. What else have we done? We're launching a VC fund. It's a long list. But what's funny is when we first sat with the guys and said, right, vote on these focus areas and ideas, if you look at the list today, it's pretty much all just tick, 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 tick. And that's the best thing that I learned at YMU, right? If you think strategically with talent, you're able to plan something out for a client. And if you get it right, it should be the same in 3 years, 5 years as it is today. And that's what we did for the guys. And yeah, we've basically then been building out a structure beneath them as almost their C-suite with them as the board to then build a structure which is entirely focused on how did we take their business and take it to the next level continually. And so far, so good.
First of all, it's very impressive. If I were to say something, so from where I'm standing, you gather all this knowledge from your corporate experience, and then you see this opportunity in signing these, obviously, already back then, famous, well-known talents. But from where I'm standing, it sounds a little bit risky having only one client. What happens if these people, they just drop you? Because especially with artists, right, with talents, they can be very emotional and impulsive. So how can you balance this, especially from a company, right, risk perspective?
Yeah. So I think interesting. I mean, that's obviously a question that we raised in the first day, right? Where it goes, is it worth it? And I think if you think about the way you'd approach a BBC and ITV, a Channel 4, big media institution, you wouldn't look at having 4 or 5 of them. But you think about that in relation to talent, when talent actually are media brands and IP at the biggest scale now. If you're working for Mr. Beast, you cannot have Mr. Beast and 10 others if you are to properly focus and build deeply. And this was the learning from YMU as well. YMU was great in so many ways, but the biggest flaw of that business is that it had so many clients across a big slate of rosters, entertainment, sport, music. I think maybe 1,000 clients, including the accountancy clients as well. You can never do anything meaningful or deeply with that group. And I think for us, it was coming into this going, right, that didn't really work because you can't extract true value. Yes, you make decent money on the 20% who smash it, but the majority who take up your time don't really make that much money. And also creatively, there's no focus. So for us, it's a case of focus deeply in with them, make sure that our agreements and our ownership of the brands are aligned and are tight rather than sort of handshake agreements, so that everything is, backed up from a level of both, waterfall arrangements. If, for example, they did fire us tomorrow, alongside ownership of the brands with them and actually having real stakes of equity rather than just kind of rev shares and so on. And then building out for them in the best possible way so that their futures and our futures are completely aligned. Because I think in that you're protecting yourself against that possibility. Either commercially, you're fine because you've set yourself up in a way that is secure against that potential. But then in the short to medium to long term, you're building something with them as true partners. And I think if you've got that partnership approach, it works. And also I've seen, if you look at America, and this was one of the big learnings, a lot of the biggest artists out there have one manager. And this was the big thing at YMU. It's like, hold on, Drake has one manager. The Weeknd has one manager. And that's pretty much all they do. They maybe have 1 or 2 others, but really they've been just focused on that one client for a long time. Think about Dre London and Post Malone, for example. There are many, many out there. And that's because when they're that big, when they are true media brands and IP, you can't be distracted. And I think it works for everyone's interest if you run it as much of a focused way as you can.
You mentioned that you also get equity in the businesses that you obviously open up with them. What are other revenue streams that Arcade Media has with your client?
Yeah, so essentially it's Side Plus, which is the paid membership club for the Sidemen. So that's $6.99 or $69.99 a year, $6.99 a month or $6.99 a year. Basically Netflix for the Sidemen, if you will, with membership sort of elements to it. That's been very successful. It's launched for 3 years. So that's one of the biggest revenue drivers. Brand deals, when they do happen, although they are infrequent because we're launching brands that the boys don't have to do brand deals. And then obviously the brands themselves. And then things like the charity match or any kind of big events where there's kind of work to be done on those. So basically anything that we do with them, we are the 8th member of the Sidemen. That's our structure. And we win as they win. And that's the best thing I think about the model, is that everyone's incentivized and aligned to kind of grow and scale together. And from a revenue perspective, that's then reflected in what we take month by month, but then also in terms of equity, which is arguably far more valuable in the long run.
Do you think that's the best way for anyone looking to be an agent in your space? So basically, for the Sidemen, you divide all the income that is coming in 8, and then obviously you're 1/8 of that income. I can see that's a lot of transparency. But how does that equate to, for example, there's a lot of overhead costs that you're going to have. So how internally, from an accounting perspective, this makes sense, right? Is this the formula?
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting. So on the point of overheads, we can strip a lot of that away because we're just with them. So we manage their money to build their team, because all we do is for them. So Arcade Media is really the Sidemen's focus management company and ventures business. So in terms of staff, in terms of scaling the team, that's not us paying for it necessarily. That's them paying for it because it's for them. Again, you can't get that luxury if you're working for 10 clients. This is one of the challenges at YME and at most management companies. You charge your 15% typically, maybe 20% in music. And then if you've got 10 clients, you have to then hire your team as a manager. And it can be a trap where you go, all right, well, let's get a social manager in, let's get this and this. And we soak that all into our 15%. This is what we did all the time. The talent doesn't pay for it because it's split across so many other people. That of course, I'm not going to pay for this person if they're also working for 5 other clients. Yeah. So then you get into a position where your 15% gets squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. And the amount you make as management is tricky. Rhyme, you were making 9 figures in revenue at the top end. You break that down because of all these services. It was fractional, maybe 15% margin or something, right? Which wasn't amazing, based on the fact that it could have been so much simpler if you have less clients, you have your big talent, you have talent paying for their own teams, and you as management take your commission to orchestrate the spending of their money and the investing of their money into resource team, studio structure, and scale. And we found that with the Sidemen, that's absolutely been the best model because A, they've been building out a good amount of liquid capital for a long time. Obviously, what they do is pretty high margin. So they've got money to therefore invest in building a studio, launching Side Plus, launching brands. And that again is a luxury that they have. Would I say this is the best model for everybody in the space? Absolutely not, because most people don't have a Sidemen to justify going all in with. So we're all in with them because they make sense to be. Most people wouldn't justify it and don't even come close, especially the way that the space is moving. I always say the guys are like the kind of Bob Dylan of this space, right? They're like legacy, nostalgia, almost heritage in their standing. They're number one, and they have crossed over into generational talent. They've been going now for a decade. Most people aren't anywhere close. And I think the way the space is moving is away from that type of superstardom. The same way with music, right? Bob Dylan's catalog is as popular as it ever was, right? But who now coming up has any real relevance or credibility? Not many people. And I think we're seeing the same in every industry. Nostalgia wins. The Sidemen have branched into nostalgia, so they have a different level of cut through and connection because they've been there for a decade. So it's interesting. So I wouldn't recommend it for everybody. If the opportunity is big enough though, and you've got the trust, the buy-in, the focus and the partnership there, focus is 100% the way.
So I've seen the documentary / TV, movie on Netflix, and I found the strategy very smart because I wasn't super knowledgeable on the whole content creator space. Yeah. So when I heard and when I saw that the strategy was basically to put together a sort of team of different talents, it looked like, I don't know, the Pablo Escobar idea that he had for the Medellin cartel, right? So individually, you're all more vulnerable, right? But collectively, we're more powerful. So I found that funny and interesting. And then I started looking at different people doing this in your space, and I found very few. So they're like the Pablo Escobar of...
Yeah. I don't think I've had that comparison before, but that's bang on. That's good. That's good.
All right. So what are the revenues of your clients? Figure.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, without, obviously it's not my data to share numbers, but yeah, it's like, I guess if you take a YouTube CPM of, £7 to £10 and you multiply that by the views that the guys get. I mean, the boys have said, right, for example, which video was it? The diss tracks, they said it in the doc, that the diss track videos alone made them like £500,000, right, from just those videos. I think Simon also has said about the cheap versus expensive holiday video making, is it made $1 million? It's made a lot of money from basically YouTube AdSense. It can create huge revenues over time if the views are really big. And because the Sidemen have been building and pumping and they're up to 20 plus million subscribers now, revenues sort of match what you'd expect for that. I think what is interesting though, as we've said, is like, building Side Plus has been a massive game changer in terms of them being able to control that revenue. Because the problem is with YouTube is that it's yours, but it's not, right? You're basically a client for YouTube advertisers who will pay a CPM through YouTube for then the distribution on your inventory. But if YouTube collapsed tomorrow, what would you do? What would you have? Not much. So building Side Plus has been an amazing insurance plan, essentially, from a commercial perspective, but also from an audience perspective, because you've got a huge base of people there, paying $6.99 a month, $6.99 a year. There's money then to invest back into that, to build studios, to create new concepts, to create a team. A lot of the team that we've built has been funded by Side Plus. But then ultimately it creates a lack of dependence on YouTube revenue, which gives the guys sort of a lifetime of security, rather than being in a position where, all right, if AdSense is down this month on YouTube, well, what happens to their income? And that's the thing I think a lot of creators do struggle with, is the dependence on the platform. If my video doesn't perform, well, I lose half my money. That's really hard. So yeah, that's partly why Side Plus was made from a commercial standpoint, is to create a greater independence away from YouTube.
Try to give me a rough figure, because what I'm trying to do here is add some clarity for anyone that is looking to enter into that game, right? To that space. How much money can you make? So how high is the ceiling?
Yeah. Well, I think again, because I'm not like allowed to say like specifics, or I can try. I'll kind of paint a picture. If you have, let's say, I mean, this is also the thing to say around the point of like, can anybody go and do this? The answer is no, right? I've seen this across the board. The Sidemen are one of one in that they have such a scaled audience, deep connection, and a content operation that is able to pump out enough value to launch a membership club like Side Plus, or to, scale a very high volume content business. Most people don't have that luxury. But let's say you were, getting, I don't know how to even describe. Let's say you were making. You had a membership club like a Patreon. Shits and Gigs, good example. They're podcasters. They have, I want to say, about 30,000 people in their Patreon paying £3 to £5 a month. That can be good revenue if your product is cheap. However, if your product is more expensive, like the Sidemen's is, then obviously whatever that, let's say that number, 30,000 times $6.99 a month, good amount of money, but you're still going to need to then invest into the big team and production.
So how do you keep the team together? Because if you look at the space of artists in general, it's normal that when a band, maybe one artist becomes more popular than another one, they end up splitting, right? And you can see this in musicians, in comedians, and so on. So how do you keep them together?
So we keep them together through taking away the headaches as much as we can. I think the one thing I would say, like, our job as management is to make their lives fun and enjoyable, both on a personal and a professional level. So what do I mean by that? It's about respecting their time. It's about building out structures that take off all the heavy lifting so they can come in and do what they do amazingly well each and every week. It's about building out, various different things that can live and breathe without them. So it's not more time pressure on their promotion, on their, they're making content around it, whatever it might be. So the aim for what we're trying to do is to build without taking up more time and adding more headaches to their plate. And if we do that and they enjoy it, there's 7 friends who've gone through so much before us. It makes it a lot easier, right? They've worked out their dynamics, their politics. They've had their ups and downs. You saw it in the doc, right? They had their fallings out. They've had a lot they've had so many things happen to them over the last decade, to the point where we're coming into a dynamic that they've already largely worked out. People, complex things can happen, but they're not at the start of their journey. It's not like you're forming one direction. You're trying to get them all to get along, right? Like, these guys have been doing this for a while. Yeah. So it makes our lives easier because they know how to work and operate. The other thing that's also really important, I think, for anybody working with sort of creative talent, is to not ever try to control or push them or force them to do things that they don't want to do. Work for them, not have them working for you. And I think a lot of managers can fall into that trap. There are some horror stories out there of managers who push their clients too hard, right? And then Avicii, good example, he ends up committing suicide. So I think for us, it's a case of give the boys as the board total freedom and work for them every single day to make their lives better, to produce better products, better value for their audience, to help them to scale their business and grow. But don't ever push them or act like they're working for you as management. I think that's just a good rule for everybody.
This space has changed so much in the last 10 years, right? Mainly because there's been an improvement in the different platforms, right? So this allows for all the content creators to become more popular and reach their audiences better. You're obviously a global expert in this domain. Have you found a recipe to success? So if I were to give you an aspiring talent right now, hey, this is the person, can you build him up to become successful?
No, I think there isn't one that can be done by anybody other than that person. So in the creator space, if you as a creator are not all the way down the line, don't bother getting management. There's no point. And I really believe that. I think the idea of sort of nurturing creators when they're kind of, at the start of their career and they have nothing, there's no point, because so many of those factors of success are outside of our control, outside of their control. The one thing that they need to do is get themselves up to a critical mass in terms of audience, in terms of the thing that they do, their voice. I think so much of being a creator is finding your voice, like finding the thing that people love about you and they come back for. And if you're not at that point and you're not already making money yourself, there's no point in getting a team. I think teams need to come in when you're at that critical mass of scale. You've already got a big audience. People know you, that you've got the content operation down independently. And then, okay, cool, you can then build that and work with that. So I'd say management should only come in when you're already kind of down the line. The idea of developing, and I think this goes for everything, right? It goes for music, goes for maybe less in film, but still to a degree. Definitely in our space, but music and the kind of creative space are kind of the same in that regard. Artists now break independently without a label, without any management. And then when they hit critical mass, and if they can sustain and build that, then they get teams across. It's a complete flip of what used to happen. So what used to happen is you'd have managers bringing a music artist up and trying to nurture them and help them to grow. And they'd find a kid on, I don't know, SoundCloud. Even before that, they'd find someone performing in a local pub. They'd sign them, and then they'd grow, they'd build them and kind of nurture their career. Kind of those days are gone really now. Now you got to blow up on TikTok, you got to build an audience, and then only once you're at scale, then you can get signed by a label if you want to. Only once you're at scale can you then get an agent or a manager. And I think that's a much healthier way of things working, right? Because ultimately then, if you're a Kaisenat, a Speed, an Aiden Ross, whoever, Sidemen, if they were doing it today, your fame and your success is on your shoulder. You put the time in, you build yourself up, and then when you're there, cool, we can talk.
There's a very interesting stat that says that there is right now 600 minutes worth of content uploaded on YouTube every minute. Obviously, that's a lot of content, and producing content is very expensive. Do you have a rough figure of how much money do you need to start?
Yeah. I mean, I think content can be expensive, but I think it can also be done now relatively cheaply. I think the barrier to entry is so low though, right? Like TikTok is free. Anybody has a phone and they can make content on TikTok. Anybody can really make a podcast now. You can distribute through things like Riverside or, whatever, or Acast.
What's the lifespan of a content creator? Can you do that 50?
I think you can. But I don't think today, I think so. What do I think? I think it's, again, a case of time. How much you're willing to consistently put into these things. If you are willing to be consistent, somebody like a Mark Goldbridge, right? Good example. He was I think he was a bin man or something, did a completely different job. Might be wrong with that. Yeah, but he was doing a completely different job. Let's just say he was a bin man. And then I think it was 45 when he was like, right, I want to start making videos. Big United fan, started his channel, and he's been hugely successful over the last few years. I don't think age is necessarily a sort of factor in terms of success, but it is in terms of time, right? I think it's partly why you see a lot of like much older people doing quite well. So like if you look on TikTok, there's a whole category of, over 60s, sort of retired. And like, I think they do quite well on TikTok because they have the time to actually put into it. And if they're willing to make videos, then again, they'll get the audience. So I think, no, it's just the hardest part is when you have responsibilities, you have kids, you have families, you have big jobs that take up time. That's the bit where, it's very difficult to commit the same levels as a kid who's 17 living at home and hasn't got any other responsibilities. You're never going to compete with that. So that's the difference. In terms of how long you can do it for, time will tell, right? No one saw TikTok coming. No one saw how that would shift things. A lot of TikTokers who were big in 2019, 20 have fallen off a cliff. So the lifespan arguably is very short. For many creators, unless you have something I think a bit deeper today, or unless you're streaming, or unless you're legacy. So if you're like legacy, like a Sidemen, and I put anybody who came up pre-COVID in that category, then you can continue. Beta Squad, people like a Max Fosh, whoever, like who've done their thing for many years, they can sit in that category where I think people will be fans of them for a long time to come. If you're coming up today, unless you're really diving into something like a streaming, I don't see massive success coming from Instagram alone, for example, or from even TikTok alone. TikTok streaming seems to be the kind of combination, but if you're not putting that big amount of time in, I don't know if it pays off these days.
But one thing is starting at the age of 50, because then you're targeting an older audience, right? And your content is suited for that audience. But something different, and this is really the question that I'm asking is, let's say you're starting at the age of 20 or in your teenage years.
Yeah.
So your audience is as young as you, right? And perhaps they start with, I don't know, gaming content. You grow older, your audience grows older.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't see someone at their 50s wanting, I don't know, to follow someone else, playing a video game on YouTube. So how do you transition? Do you
say that?
target?
I think you say that. For the 50-year-olds we see today, right? But actually the 50-year-olds coming up, who are going to be 50. When I'm 50, most of my friends and people who I know, and even the generation below, like gaming, like the culture that's existing today will be the current, that a lot of those sort of habits and norms are going to continue till when they are 50 and over, right? A lot of adults today in their 40s, 50s, big gaming contingent, right? And they have more disposable income. Huge part of that market is actually slightly older, right? Because the people who were 30, 20 years ago still had gaming, right? Still had consoles. They were at the start of that period. So I think, for me though, it's time will tell on longevity. What I do know is that the people who develop connection in the pre-COVID, pre-TikTok era, like a Sidemen, like a Mr. Beast and others, they have that longevity. It's proving out every day, right? They've transitioned into generational, institutional brands like a Bob Dylan or a Michael Jackson or something for this space. What isn't proven out yet is if the people coming up today through TikTok, through streaming, etc., will have that long tail. I think the streamers will. I think Kai Cenat, Speed, I think they'll have a long career. They'll be the unicorns in a way. But the TikTokers, a lot of them have fallen into irrelevance already. And TikTok's only been around for a few years. Even people like Charlie D'Amelio or others who, in the tens of millions of followers back in 2019, they've struggled to sustain at the same level because, the content and the trends change so much and the connection to the individual isn't there. Even if you've got followers, it doesn't really mean people are connecting with you. So it's an interesting time. And I think only time will tell.
Jordan, you are an unusual character. At 26, you're married, you have kids, and you don't drink alcohol. Right. So these are things that are not normal and particularly unusual for someone with your success. Why did you take these decisions at such an early stage in life?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I think I guess going back into them one by one, the first one was being married, kids, and then drinking. I think drinking came first. So I sort of spent maybe between the ages of 17 to 19 and a bit before, going out, partying, going in a way, living vicariously through my friends who were at uni when I wasn't or when I dropped out, going up to all the different unis that I could, going to as many festivals as I could, just going kind of big on that whole lifestyle because in the UK, that is pervasive. It's the biggest lifestyle within people of that age demographic when they're at uni, and I was right in that. So I found myself kind of going too far into that whole world, right, of just partying constantly, going out constantly, and all the things that come with that. And then I remember when I was at Lab Bible, you can kind of maybe get away with it when you're working at a company, and that's the culture of the company as well. But then when in media in the UK,
sorry, the culture of a company is to drink.
Yeah, and party, going out. Yeah. Like, as in like just, it's called Lab Bible, right? That was but also when I was at Vice, same thing. It's called Vice. You don't stand a chance. I think in media in London, right, the culture is you go to the pub, you go out, you drink like Thursday night beers, whatever, right? That's the culture here.
I think media companies after this episode are going to get, I don't know, a lot of different applications.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. You can. Why is it so popular as an industry? I don't know. But that is the culture, especially in Shoreditch, East London. Anyway, so you're a part of that, but then all of your friends are in uni and that culture is amplified times 100. Like people just party constantly, drinking constantly, doing everything else you can imagine constantly. So for me, it was a case of being in that and getting to a stage when then I decided to start my own company when I was 19, started my own agency called Roundabout, off the back of being at Lab Bible for a year and a half, loving it, learning a lot, but being young and thinking, actually, there's an opportunity for me to take my age as a 19-year-old, my contacts in the industry, and bring those to brands who want to basically reach people my age. Because I realized, hold on, the one thing that no one can take away from you in terms of experience or anything else is that me as an 18, 19-year-old in the industry can credibly say that I understand what 18 to 19-year-olds of my demographic want, right? And that there's value in that for brands who are trying to reach people of my age. That's what I felt at Lab Bible when I learned. So I started my own agency, Roundabout, which was great. And I did that for 6 months, and that led to me then going to YMU, who were one of the clients then. I remember during that 6-month period being in the spot of going, still going out, still partying, still doing a lot of that stuff. And, you have those nights, right? I remember also when I was working at James Grant, I always passed this book every day in the literary side. This is when I had my company Roundabout. We were working with them as an agency. And so I'd pass in the literary division. There was a book called like The Joy of Being Sober. I'd always just walk past it. And I always just kind of, was that picking up? That's fine. And I'd always just walk past this book, and sometimes, these things subliminally, they kind of come in, and I always just felt myself getting more drawn and more sort of pulled towards sobriety, and to stopping, because I realized that actually having my business and going out and almost having the lag of that lifestyle was just not compatible. And you have certain nights, right? I remember one night, like it was October 2017, it would have been, A$AP Rocky, the rapper, his birth. This is like such a weird time, but like his birthday party at this members club that's now shut down in Shoreditch called The Curtain, and like I went there. Me and a bunch of guys who I was friends with at the time were there, and it was just hideously messy, as you can imagine, just grim on all fronts, right? And that's a fun, you could argue, but no. And then we end up going to like the box and doing whatever there and being incredibly out of everything, right? And I just remember waking up almost in the middle of Soho. This is like on a Wednesday, and just going like, what? And I've lost my phone. Someone's probably taken my phone. And then it's like 9 o'clock. My now wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, I knew she was like, she would have been just texting my phone, trying to call me, trying to get in contact, but she was probably panicking. I had to get the bus back because I had nothing else on me. I had to get the bus back from Soho all the way to where I live in Crouch End. And then I get home, and then coincidentally, arguably, providentially, I would say, my computer then breaks at the same time. So I'm stuck without a computer or a phone, having my own business, having things to do, and going like, what am I doing? And it was one of those nights that you'll remember for the rest of your life where you go, this can't run anymore. And then that was, I think, the biggest trigger point where it started to wind down. And then I remember getting to Christmas and going, you know what, actually, I'm just going to stop. And also, me and my now wife, my girlfriend at the time, Millie, we've been going out for a few months at that time. So we kind of had each other. And then, and so it was a lot easier than if you're, a young boy going out, trying to hit on girls and everything else as young boys at that time, but obviously of all time have done. Drinking and all of that lifestyle is just a part of being that kind of age. It feels at times, shouldn't be, but it is. So I had that excuse to not. And then, it was basically about winding that down. And then I decided one day, I was like, that's it, I'm not doing it anymore. And I was never the sort of person who could go out and have like, one pint and be happy. Do you know what I mean? A lot of people they can go out and be like, yeah, cool, 1 pint, go home, go to bed. For me, it was more like, if you're out, you're out. And that's quite dangerous because it means that on a Wednesday, if somebody's like, yeah, should we go out to A$AP Rocky's birthday party? Yeah, cool, okay. And then 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning, you're in Soho without your phone, without your laptop, and life's kind of a mess. So it was an easy decision. I started 2018 not drinking and then didn't. So it's been however many years since then. And I think after the first couple of months, it becomes quite easy. Once you start telling people, once you stop seeing the sort of people you were hanging around with before. And then I felt like it was like a mist of lifestyle kind of goes. And then you can see things very clearly. And Millie stopped as well. She stopped drinking at the time. So we both stopped together. And then settling down, getting married, having kids, all these things just kind of felt like the natural progression of life because the mist of, alcohol and drug infused kind of party culture kind of goes. It just sort of fades out and you settle down, literally. And I think from there, it just became very easy and everything started to slot into place. So and from that point, it's kind of been onwards ever since.
I'm very interested in how the synergies in between different co-founders have a direct impact into the success of a business or a failure for that matter. So how is your relationship with your co-founder?
It's the best. We have 3 of us. We almost sometimes sit and just go like, wow, we're really lucky, guys. Like, we don't ever argue. We have constructive criticisms and debates about things. But generally,
I think you're the first co-founder ever that doesn't argue.
I know.
Do you want to be business with me?
Oh man, let's do it. I'd love to. But that's the thing. It's like having 3 of us helps because there's also more of a committee in that. And then we have Victor, who's our sort of honorary 4th co-founder, if you will, who was our first sort of big hire and the managing director. He came in to run Side Plus. But me, Sam, and Aaron as a 3 have an amazing relationship because I think, all of us are. We don't bring our ego to the door with things, right? I know it's a bit of an ego thing to say that even, right? Oh, I'm humble. It's like, no, but I think we all bring a sense of humility to the table and we're aware that actually we're trying to find the best outcome, not our own personal feelings to triumph for any reason other than it's the right thing. And I think, we've gone through a number of situations and stayed very calm and composed. There's been good things, bad things. We've had moments where things have felt really intense and so on. And we all have different things to bring to the table. The other thing, right, we all know our place. Like Sam and Aaron are both accountants. That's their trade, right? Aaron was an accountant for however many years at YMU. Sam has been an accountant for a decade. So me as a non-accountant who doesn't care about accounting, like it's so boring, just leave you guys do that stuff. I'm creative, strategic, that's my background. So it blends really well. And I think it's allowed us to have a stable flow of healthy progress, strong progress, moving very quickly, but also peace, right? And that's kind of the best thing I think in a co-founder relationship is to have peace, and peace defined as the tranquility of order, right? When things are ordered, they're peaceful. We have order because we know our place. We don't have each other trampling. There's no tussling for status, and I think all of us bring each other down to sort of share always in the upside and in the downside, rather than one of us being glorified and up there. And I think, it's worked incredibly well as a result. But again, I think it's quite rare. So I'm very fortunate.
I'm very lucky because I get to have these conversations with incredible people like yourself from different industries. So I'm becoming like a small dictionary of different topics, which is great because for a lot of these different industries, I knew very little. But what I'm also very interested is in knowing how all these people, including yourself, see themselves. In your case, would you define yourself as successful?
I would say maybe relative to other people, maybe my age, materially, from a job perspective, career perspective. On an objective spectrum of career progression, I would say relatively, yeah. Am I successful to myself? I think I don't define success in terms of material, financial, job, any of those things. I
How would you
define
define it?
more interiorly. I mean, for me, like, I'm much more focused on basically spiritual success and having peace and contentment, and doing what I'm supposed to do in terms of virtue and being a good person. Like I say success is based in those things for me, more than in anything material, and definitely more than anything in terms of my job. And it's about, I think, trying to have to your point on positive impact, right? Like trying to have a positive impact, trying to do the right thing in the areas that I have control over, and to try and live a virtuous and good life. That's why I define success.
Jordan, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
This has been very insightful, and I appreciate your openness. You are at the forefront of an industry that is evolving and changing a lot of things of our world, and I'm looking forward to what you do next.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, it's been a great conversation. It's nice to be like given some more challenging like questions. You know what I mean? Often you do these things and it's like, more your story, but actually we got into it, which was great. So thank you for having me. And excited to listen to the next one.
Thank you.